Hello again, and welcome to part 2 of Denton's Tales, looking at the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about the Viking Age. Staying up in Åsgard, another inaccuracy concerns the Valkyria, or the Valkyries in English, Valkyria being the singular form, the armoured warrior women who gather slain warriors from the battlefield and carry them aloft to feast with the gods in Åsgard. A sort of dead guys flying taxi service, you could say. But was that actually their sole function? No, not by a long way. But they are always seen in that one precise role, flying romantically through the sky with dead warriors slung across their horses. And indeed, their very name comes from that. Val, meaning one who is killed in battle, and Kyria, meaning someone feminine who chooses something. So they are literally the choosers of the slain warriors. However, despite that seemingly defining title, they had another duty, their principal duty in fact, which was not to simply carry dead men skywards despite their name, but it was to be their waitresses when they got them there, the serving girls of Valhall, the bar staff, if you like, bringing mead and ale and other lovely delicacies to the once fighters, as the dead warriors were known, the Einherjar, and probably providing, how shall we put this delicately? Well, probably providing more intimate services as well. You know, a little bit of hanky-panky, how's your father, plus a horn of mead would make the afterlife quite enjoyable. But, even in the Viking Age, battles were actually very infrequent. Days or weeks or even months could pass without anyone being killed anywhere. But in Valhall, the drinking, the feasting, the fighting, and the other things went on 24/7, 365 days in a year. You don't need a lot of sleep when you're already dead. The feasting going on all night, every night. So the Valkyria would have spent most of their time serving rather than dead men collecting. That's something that I've seldom ever seen mentioned, but it's obvious when you think about it. Well, it's not as romantic, of course, as dragging a dead warrior onto your horse and leaping into the sky, perhaps screaming something like Brunhilde's higher to hoe battle cry from Wagner's Die Walküre, as the Ride of the Valkyries plays at full volume in the background. But better than just sitting around for days on end playing board games or polishing your helmets while waiting for somebody to get snuffed somewhere. Can you imagine, a bunch of Valkyries if they'd nothing to do but pick up dead guys? Oh, look, some guy just got a spear through his guts in Gotland. First one this month. Who wants to go and get him? No, not me. I'm reading a book. Sorry, we're playing a game. No, feeding me horse. I got the last one 2 weeks ago. Oh, all right then, I'm bored anyway. I'll go and get him. Yes, it paints an interesting picture, doesn't it? And with further regards to the Valkyria, it is frequently stated that they were Odin's daughters, the impression being that blood relation to the Allfather was a prime requirement to be a Valkyria. A considerable piece of misinformation, I'm afraid. Nepotism had no place in Åsgard, and no, they were not Odin's daughters. They were not even all of one species. Some of them were human, some of them were divine. One named Sigrun, the daughter of a human king, and another the daughter of a female giant, for example, all appointed to the position by Odin. There is no indication in the sagas, even if they had immortality or any other special attributes from their position other than the obvious ability to fly, though there again, whether that was their own ability or that of their horses isn't really stated. Could they fly, or did the horses fly and they simply put their bums on them and were, carried up just the same as the dead men were by the horses? And what seems to have been an invisibility of some kind. Yes, they do seem to have had that, since they are seldom ever seen by the combatants on the battlefield. Well, other than the dead ones, of course. Yet another misconception about them is that they only took those killed in battle aloft to Åsgard. They didn't actually kill anybody themselves. No, they just picked up the bits and pieces left over from the killing being done by other people. But, you see, that's not true. No. One of their duties was to select who would die and who would live, following orders given to them by Odin before they left Åsgard for the battlefield, making sure that those chosen by the All-Father to die did so. Then they would take them to Åsgard after ensuring that they were good and dead. And if they weren't, well, then they'd kill them themselves, or they would assist another warrior to do it. Because, you see, Odin was always very fussy about who he wanted for his army of the dead. Very, very fussy indeed. He didn't want just Tom, Dick, or Harry. Oh, no. And he liked to make the choice himself, rather than leaving it to the warriors themselves to kill each other, because the wrong man, you see, might get killed. The one that Odin didn't want. And then, then Odin will be stuck with the guy he didn't want, who wasn't really such a great warrior, but he'd won by kind of luck or a trick or something like that. And the one that he, had wanted, well, he didn't get. The famous Valkyria Brunhild is punished by Odin for killing the wrong man in the battle, the man she was supposed to help. He was mightily pissed off about that. Oh, Odin did get pissed off rather easily, I must say. So they were actually far more complicated than is generally thought. Killers when required. Oh yes, as well as gatherers of the dead, and of course waitresses and bar staff, and how shall we put it? Oh yes, social entertainers, I think we could call them. Yes, I think you get the picture there. Another frequent misconception is that the gods, the Aesir and the Vanir, were a completely different race from the Jotnar, or giants, Jotun being the singular form, and that the giants were, just that, giant, very big, like in Jack and the Beanstalk or Game of Thrones. Fee-fi-fo-fum, I spell the blood of an Englishman. That sort of thing, Actually, see, most of the giants they were little different from anyone else. They weren't enormous in size. They didn't go clumping around. They weren't like 10 feet tall or anything. And the word Jotun, in fact, has nothing to do with size. No, it comes from a root that means to eat, to consume. So the giants are really called big eaters, if you like. I suppose you could say gluttons. Yeah, you could call them that. And they actually intermarried with the gods. I mean, Thor's mother, for example, was a giant, as was Odin's. Some of the gods themselves were giants. Skadi, for example, after her marriage to Njordr, and Loki also, as well as his daughter Hel. They would be better seen, I suppose, as a different tribe, if you like, rather than a different race. Think of them as, say, the Apache and the Lakota, two tribes, rather than as Europeans and Africans, two races. Hope that clears that one up. Another misconception concerns the Nornir, or the Norns, as it is in English. They did not spin the destiny of mortals. No, actually, they carved it on wood. They cut on a stick, we are told. The idea of spinning or weaving, well, that actually comes from the Morai of Greece, often called the Fates, who did do just that. They spun. And somehow that got attached to the Nornir at a later date, but it isn't found in genuine Old Norse belief. Nor were there only 3 Nornir. Well, there were a considerable number of them, and not just among the Norse. No, they existed in other lands as well, and the idea of just 3 of them, well, that also comes from the Greek Morai. Only 3 of the Nornir are actually named in the Old Norse stories. That's Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld. But there were many, many more of them, and as I say, not just in Scandinavia. They were already all over the place. But the spinning idea, that isn't actually correct. Now, I think most people have got the message that Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, though one still sees them depicted that way, even in places that really should do a better service to historical truth, such as some museums that have Viking-themed items like keychains or little doll-like figures in their gift shops, and there are the horns. Now, horns may well have been used by the Volur, plural, or Volva, singular, the Nordic female shamans, since horned headdresses using deer antlers, for example, were, and still are, used by shamans. Maria Franz in the excellent German folk group Heilung uses such a headdress, for example, looking very much as many a Volva would have looked, I'm sure. And some warriors, well, they probably decorated their helmets with symbols such as, bones, feathers, horsehair plumes, and the like. But a Viking war helmet with horns sticking out of it, actually an integral part of the helmet, is an invention of very recent times, which we may lay principally at the feet of Richard Wagner, or, well, no, rather, I suppose, to be accurate, rather one Karl Emil Doppler, a costume designer for Wagner's cycle of operas, Der Ring das Nibelungen, the Ring of the Nibelungs, where he dressed the men with horns on their helmets, the women got wings, and illustrators of the popular magazines and the like began drawing not only Wagner's characters in that manner, but genuine historical figures as well. So we got the Viking horned or winged helmet. A pure piece of theatrical fiction, but it became the very symbol of the Vikings. I mean, nothing else was needed to show who they were supposed to be. Oh, look, he's got horns, and he said, he's a Viking, yes. That's my response, actually, to those who say, no, it's only entertainment. I mean, so what if the Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, or they traded on farms just as much as they raided? It's just a TV show. It's a movie. It's popular entertainment. Who cares? Yes, you see, it is popular entertainment, just as opera in the 19th century was popular entertainment. And before mass communication, as we have it today, of course. Yet the horned helmet idea managed to spread from the theatre stage in Bayreuth in Germany right around the world, so that the entire world thought Vikings wore horned helmets. That is my point, you see, about getting it right. Popular entertainment can cause and spread false information, or fake news, as we like to term it these days. And, it's just as easy to get it right as it is to get it wrong. So making costumes, why not just make them right? It is something that is a bit of a sore point, I must say, with me. Now, calling them Vikings is in itself a misconception, since they weren't. No, despite being always referred to as Vikings, the Vikings weren't actually Vikings. I mean, nobody in those days called them Vikings. Even the Vikings never called themselves Vikings, because to call someone a Viking as a term of nationality, well, I mean, that'd be rather like calling a truck driver a truck. Well, he just drives a truck. He isn't actually a truck. Viking, or Vikinger in Old Norse, was a term that meant, well, one got in a ship and they went somewhere in the ship and they did something or other when they got wherever it was they got in the ship, be it raiding, trading, founding settlements, exploring, or whatever, just floating along watching the coast go by, You could see the term as meaning pirates or adventurers, men going on a quest, or entire families heading off to found a settlement somewhere, so they could go a Vikinger. But they couldn't be Vikinger. There's quite a difference, other than in the sense of being men and sometimes women who were at that moment going a Vikinger. I mean, they would have called themselves Danes, Norwegians, or Swedes, or Frisians, as would other people. I mean, the Anglo-Saxons calling them things like Northmen, heathens, Norsemen, plus a lot of very obscene terms, I'm sure, after they burned your village and ran off with your wife. And the Irish referred to them as the Dovgal, the dark foreigners, the Danes, or the Fingal, the fair foreigners, Norwegians. Really, nobody called them Vikings. They didn't even use that term themselves, save in that very limited ship-related context. And even the ship wasn't actually a Viking ship. No. Now, I hear you say, well, what about these? The famous but long ships. I mean, weren't they Viking ships? No, they were not. See, there was no such thing as a Viking ship. No, it was simply a long ship in which some men were sailing who were going a Viking. The ship was, it was a ship. That was it. It was just a ship. Its Vikingness depended on, what the people in the ship were doing at the time when they were in it. Get in a ship and sail off looking for plunder or adventure, trade, or new lands to settle, and you were a Viking. Stay at home and never set foot in a ship, when you were just a Dane, a Norwegian, a Swede, or a Frisian. You were Norse, as you were when you returned from your sea voyage and set foot on dry land once again. You left your Vikingness back in the ship. And we must remember that not all Norsemen went Viking. Many stayed at home. An entire village didn't all pile into a very overcrowded ship and trawl off for months at a time. There would have been many Norsemen who never set foot in a ship. The term Viking, of course, is now attached to anything and everything to do with the Norse. Viking this and Viking that, Viking art, Viking culture, Viking weapons, religion, everything is Viking. Well, there was no Viking art or Viking clothing or Viking culture, but there's plenty of Norwegian, Danish and Swedish art and clothing, etc. And I suppose given its universal usage, we are stuck with the term Viking, like it or not, to describe anything whatsoever connected with Scandinavia in those days. You know, the Vikings, in the actual context of that term, or at least the raiding bit, are seen as the epitome of violence, murdering, raping everything female that still had a pulse, and plundering with a savage ferocity never equalled before or since, taking a wanton cruelty to positive Olympian heights of achievement, looting the hard work of others rather than working for anything themselves, devoid of any basic human decency. Oh, the horror of it, yes! Well, another misconception, I'm afraid, despite its being repeated in many documentaries and books that stress nothing but the brutality that would obviously accompany raiding, without any other aspects being considered, or the brutality itself analysed, because that is something you really have to do. It always annoys me when I see documentaries that concentrate so heavily on brutal raids against villages or monasteries that often don't even mention or just give a passing remark about settlement, trading, farming, all the normal activities of family life in those days. No, they just look at savage men with big axes leaping off dragon-headed ships. In truth, the Vikings were no more brutal than anyone else of their day. Certainly, they were no worse than the Roman legions of previous centuries, or many of the noble Christian knights who followed them, the Spanish Inquisition, or the ethnic cleansing of our own recent history. Well, yeah, they killed ruthlessly when they attacked, or just as everyone else did at that time, you see. I mean, there was no such thing as a nice, friendly, pleasant, gentlemanly raid. No. I say, Anglo-Saxon person, if you don't mind, we would like to raid your village, take all your wealth, rape your women, and take them as slaves, if you don't mind, of course. No, certainly, old chap, yes. Always delighted to meet new people. Give them a bit of a helping hand, don't you know? Yes. Well, you're welcome to any wealth you can find around here. There isn't a lot of it. But as to the women, they're not the tastiest, I'm afraid. You can have my wife. I've been trying to get rid of her for years. No, if you had something they wanted, and you were not going to give it to them without a fight, then they were going to either drive you away or kill you as quickly as possible. And they used brutality to good effect. Oh, yes, making themselves feared so that people were less inclined to resist. The appearance of their fearsome-looking dragon-headed ships, well, that was enough in itself to send terrified villagers running for the hills. One brutal massacre reported to other towns or villages along the coast. Well, that made subsequent raids that much easier. It probably actually saved lives on both sides in many instances. There was good psychology before psychology was officially invented, and it often resulted in people paying them to go away, as happened in England, for example, with the Danegeld, which was the payment of silver, as a rule, to get the Vikings to leave without bloodshed, giving them a victory without loss to themselves, as well, of course, as bringing them back time and time again to get it all over again, rather than what the English had intended it to do, which was to get rid of them altogether. Yes, making it one of history's worst ideas. All that did was make them come back again for more. Like paying a blackmailer. It doesn't stop with the first payment. There's a runestone in Scandinavia commemorating one Viking who went to England for Danegeld 3 times. And, of course, they were frequently quite happy to trade. Again, getting what they wanted without fighting for it. In fact, Norse trading became very extensive across the known world of that era, as we shall see. They quite often preferred trading. I mean, after all, if you could get your wealth without having to fight, the chances of being alive to collect the benefits of it were obviously greatly improved, if you didn't have to fight. You know, they are seen so incorrectly as nothing but raiders. That's all they did 365 days a year. Their considerable trading activities usually overlooked, which is a total distortion of history. They were the greatest traders of their day, travelling the river systems of Europe from the Baltic down to the Black Sea, reaching Constantinople and Baghdad, trading furs, superbly crafted metalwork, amber, timber, and slaves, returning with exotic goods from the Middle East and from as far away as India, yes. Their exploring and colonizing activities were extensive, greater than anyone else since the Roman Empire, or those who came after them for many centuries, in fact. Of course, even the Romans never got further west than Wales. But the Norse travelled too. I mean, they settled in Ireland, the Orkneys, Shetland and Faroe Islands, the Isle of Man, parts of Wales and Scotland, and far out across the Atlantic Ocean to Iceland, Greenland and North America, to what we now know as Newfoundland and New Brunswick, the latter being what they termed Vinland because of the wild grapes that grew there. They established settlements in France and England and what would later become Russia, Belarus and the Ukraine, leaving a considerable cultural legacy in the lands they settled that has come down to us today. I mean, most of the major towns in Ireland, were founded by the Norse, not the native Irish. And both English and Irish Gaelic have many words in everyday use today that come directly from Old Norse, as well as town names. And, they were very open to those people they settled among. Oh, yes, I mean, intermarriage and religious conversion became common, as here in Ireland, for example. The Norse not viewing other races in the inferior and oppressive way that the colonial empires of the 18th and 19th century did, when intermarriage with natives, that was almost unthinkable. You couldn't do that. In that sense, they were far more liberal and tolerant than the supposedly more civilized nations who would later colonize the Americas, Africa, and parts of Asia, whose treatment of many native populations exceeded anything like the Vikings had done in its brutality. And unlike the Norse colonists, things like fair trade rather than exploitation, intermarriage, or conversion to the religion of those peoples, the way the Norse did to Christianity, it was completely out of the question. Intermarriage? Oh, good heavens! Oh, good heavens! Intermarriage with natives? Oh, good me, absolutely disgusting. No, couldn't possibly do what. I'd rather marry me horse. Yes, it was a slight difference, really, wasn't there? It's worth noting that King Leopold of Belgium's horrific treatment of the people of the Belgian Congo was on a scale never known among the Vikings, and a Viking warrior would have been dishonoured by similar behaviour. In part 3, we shall look at the trading, the cleanliness. We shall look at female warriors, if they existed, of course. Fun fact. Yes, they did, but not as portrayed in TV shows like Vikings. And Christianity's effect on the Norse people, which was considerable. Christianity had a really big effect on the North. It more or less ended, if you like, what we might term the Viking Age. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope you will also enjoy part 3. For now, I shall say farewell.